The weather has been so nice out today. I thought while I was feeding the horses dinner, I could introduce you guys to all of the horses that I currently have. As usual, my taskmaster Tiny is meowing at me to get out of the truck and get to work.
Boss.
She is completely recovered from her little health scare that we had last week, so she is back to her normal self. I was trying to decide which order to introduce the horses in, and I figured I'd just start with the one that I've had the longest.
Oh, Nigel.
While Nigel holds the honor of being the oldest horse I have on the property, Frisco Bill is the one that I have owned the longest. He was born in 1995 and he just celebrated his 29th birthday.
Oh.
Frisco pretty much rules the roost around here. He gets to do whatever he wants. This time of year, he just gets to wander around and eat whatever grass he wants. Nigel is a little bit jealous of him. Over this last year, these two have become pretty good pals.
Oh boy.
I have owned Frisco since he was a yearling, and we have pretty much been all around the country together. In his younger days, he was quite a little whippersnapper. He stayed pretty sassy until he was about 18 years old, and then he finally started to slow down a little bit. He has helped me start hundreds of colts. He does a really good job ponying. These days, I really don't ask too much of him. I take him for a spin every once in a while, but for the most part, this guy is predominantly retired now. Over the last couple of years, he has been having a harder time keeping weight, especially in our really harsh Montana winters.
Nigel.
He does get along with the majority of horses, but in the last couple of years, they've really been picking on him out in the pasture. I think a lot of them have finally realized just how old he is and that he can't keep up like he used to.
Nigel.
He does have some serious gray starting to peek through. I try to get him out and moving as much as possible because he's not out in a big pasture anymore. For being almost 30 years old, he does look pretty fit most of the time though. He is around 14 2 hands and he is the prettiest liver chestnut color. Anything I wanted to learn growing up, Frisco Bill had to learn too, so he's been a jumping horse, we've done cutting, reining, the cow horse stuff. The only thing he really doesn't enjoy too much is trail riding. He just gets way too bored. Frisco Bill is a performance bred registered quarter horse, so his mind really needs to stay active, and the best way to do that is to get him out into the arena doing hard things.
Frisco Bill.
Currently, Frisco's best friend is Prim. I think he just likes having one of the only mares on the property all to himself. I've slowly started to separate these two because Prim needs to get started under saddle, and it is going to create some problems because I can't take Frisco everywhere she goes. It looks like Tani is playing a little bit hard to get today. I'm just going to go ahead and leave Frisco Bill turned out while I feed the other horses their dinner. Luckily, he has never had any trouble being out on grass, so he can eat as much as he wants throughout the day while I'm here. I'm going to continue with the next horses that I have had the longest. Most of the horses that I currently have will be here for the duration. There are only a few that will probably be moving on to new homes. The horses that gain permanent residence here, they do have specific training problems or issues that make them difficult to rehome. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad horse, but the level of horsemanship required to keep these guys safe and sound is a little bit higher. I am pretty lucky that I have the space, time, and money to offer this to a bunch of the horses that I get in. After Frisco Bill, the next horse that I have on the property that I have had the longest is Pete. I got Pete in the spring of 2017, so I've had him for quite a while now. I just looked at his papers and his birthday is actually tomorrow. He will be turning 10 years old.
Pete!
Pete is a racing bred quarter horse and he is extremely fast. When these guys finally get out on pasture and are able to stretch their legs, it will become pretty apparent that he is much faster than all of the other horses. Pete is one that I always forget how long I've had him. He does carry a bunch of scars from his time at the first horse trainer he visited. All those white rub marks on his back are from the first horse trainer, as well as this giant chunk of muscle missing. While all of his physical wounds have healed, the toll that it took on him mentally was pretty intense. Even though he is 10 years old, mentally he still has the brain of a 2 or 3-year-old horse. These horses that I get in that have previous trauma from training do tend to stay kind of stagnant and never really mature. He still has a bunch of scars on all of his legs from when he was roped. There are a lot of things that I let Pete do that another horse would not be able to get away with because I do understand the trauma that he has had with his past training. Since he isn't going anywhere, he is one of the ones that kind of gets stuck on the back burner a lot of times. About a year after I bought Pete, I acquired Gus. I haven't done a full video on Gus because his story isn't that exciting. His breeders were taking him to the same sale that I bought Pete at, and they just happened to be driving past my house, and I decided to buy him before he ever got to the sale. Other than a few pictures, it was a sight unseen situation for Gus. He was an unstarted 3-year-old, and judging by the few pictures, he looked like just the kind of horse that I would like. He is not a registered quarter horse. His sire was a son of missing cash, and his dam was a ranch bred mare that was not registered. Gus is around 15 hands. Buying a horse sight unseen, you never really know what you're gonna get, and Gus did have these old wire scars around his legs when he hopped off the trailer. It could have been the reason that he was getting sold, but it's more likely that because he was gray, they just couldn't invest the time in him. He was probably one of the easiest horses I've ever had to start. He has never bucked a single time in his life, but unfortunately he can be very spooky on the ground sometimes. He is one that I had planned on selling several times, but he does have a few little quirks that make me nervous about sending him on to a new home.
Pete!
Pete and Gus are best friends. I'm not sure if it's because I bought them pretty close together or if they just genuinely like each other. I do typically separate them in the springtime when I start working them because they settle down a lot faster. Gus also does have some subclinical laminitis in the spring sometimes, so I need to keep a very close eye on him. That is one of the reasons that I probably won't ever sell him. A lot of horses have come and went until I got the next permanent resident. I am pretty good about moving horses on when they're ready for their new home. So it was about 2 years of rescue and rehab until I found my next permanent resident.
Hey, Whip.
My favorite sale to go to used to have a big auction in January, which is a tricky sale to get to in the dead of winter in Montana. In the winter of 2020, I did get Goose from the same auction where Pete came from. When I purchased Goose, he did sell as a grade horse. He was extremely skittish and scared of people when I bought him. He can still be quite suspicious of everything I'm doing, and I just need to give him a little bit of extra time to warm up to me. He is another one that is quite old, but he acts very young and immature minded. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, but Goose does have a very faint V brand on his thigh. I did some serious internet sleuthing to figure out where Goose actually came from, and I reached out to his breeder. They actually recognized him right away, and I was able to get these super cute baby pictures of him. I also found out that he was a lot older than I thought he was at the sale.
Goose.
Goose was born this same exact year as Pete, and he just turned 10 a few days ago. Goose and Pete are very similar in the respects that they are a little bit afraid of humans. Pete is mostly reactive from heavy-handed training, while Goose is reactive just because that is naturally how he is. I have a few friends that have horses from this same breeder, and they all kind of act the same way. Although I did get Goose from a loose horse sale, the people that brought him were fairly well-known trainers. He was also in excellent condition when I got him in the sale. I think he was probably the healthiest horse that I've ever bought from the loose pen. Like Pete, Goose does get set on the back burner a lot just because I know I probably will never sell him. It also takes him a lot of consistent work to be pretty level-headed. He is right around 15 hands, and as you can tell from his body type, he is at a higher risk of metabolic disorders. It is getting pretty close to the point where Goose and Whiplash are going to have really varying nutritional needs, and I might have to separate them. Goose's best bud is Whiplash, who just happens to be the next horse that I purchased. I had seen an ad on Facebook for Whiplash for several months before I decided to buy him. My favorite horse of all time is Hiatus Little Pep, and Whiplash is an own son of him. I haven't put up a full story on Whiplash, but his story is a little bit crazy, so I am going to get to it one day. Long story short, Whiplash was a pasture pet most of his life until I bought him. I got him a few months after I bought Goose in 2020. He was born in 2004, so he is 20 years old this year. When I first purchased Whiplash, he was still a stallion. I don't typically like to breed horses, but Whiplash was one of only a handful of own sons of Hiatus Little Pep. I was really hoping to preserve that bloodline, but because he wasn't handled for much of his life, he had an extremely hard time being in a new place. His old owners did take really good care of him, but they never started him under saddle, and he had not been exposed to a lot of other horses. I used to manage some breeding operations, so I do have a lot of experiences with stallions, but Whiplash was hands down the worst one I have ever dealt with. Making the decision to geld him was probably the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Thankfully, the procedure went smoothly, and now he is much happier getting to live a life with the company of other horses. I haven't shown these little guys in my other videos because I was nervous that their eggs wouldn't hatch. The last couple of days though, I have seen some little tiny baby killdeer running around. Tiny doesn't care too much for birds, but I've been trying to find where their nest is so I don't accidentally run them over with the four-wheeler. These birds have the tiniest nest, and they're just like little scratches in the ground. It has been quite a few years since I've seen these little babies out and about, so I'm gonna try my best to keep them safe. As I was leaving the arena, I got my first glimpse of these little tiny poof balls. These babies are extremely hard to see. They just blend right in with the rocks. These birds have a pretty unique tactic to keep predators away from their young. They will lay down and pretend they have a broken wing. It looks like this pair has two tiny little babies that they're trying to keep safe. Tiny is actually really scared of the adult birds, so she won't even try and go near the babies either. Here is just another quick look at the mama bird pretending to be injured. Out of all of the babies that I get to see in the spring, I think I like these little guys the most. When these little babies are in trouble, they just kind of squat down and don't make a sound, so you have to be really careful that you don't accidentally step on them or run them over. Speaking of baby birds, before we go on to the next horses, I'm just gonna pop over and see how the little baby robins are doing. It's crazy how fast these little guys are growing up, and soon they'll be leaving the nest and I'll be able to use my trailer again. The next horse that I bought was actually only a few days after I got Whiplash. With all of the baby birds bouncing around out here, I have been keeping Huckleberry away, and the baby gophers have gotten pretty brazen. They have even gotten to the point where they don't run away when they see me coming.
Stewy! Hey, Stu!
The next two horses on my list are best buds for now. These two are about the same size at around 14 hands. I did purchase Gus from the same sale that I got Pete and Goose from. Gus was a little bit of an impulse buy. I had recognized him from a sale that was a few months earlier, and I did need a horse to ride in the trailer with a mule that I had purchased. My favorite kind of horse is just a little brown cow pony, so he fit right in with the herd. Little Gus is probably just a hair shorter than 14 hands. When I bought him, I already had a horse named Gus, so I just started calling him Little Gus until I figured out a different name, and it just kind of stuck. He was broke to ride when I got him, but he did have some serious medical issues along with some extreme anxiety that we had to work through. It's something that I do have to keep in mind because it will crop up if he's in stressful situations or anything out of the norm happens. He also gets pretty excited to go on trailer rides to new places. Little Gus was sold as grade, but I would not be surprised if he was one of the horses that had their papers taken and sold with another horse. Unfortunately, this does still happen. There are some really shady traders out there that will switch the papers on horses. Gus is 12 years old, but he does act a lot more spry. I purchased Stewy about 6 months after I got Little Gus. He is maybe an inch shorter than Little Gus. Stewy is grade, and he is one of only a few horses that carry my brand. Something notable about Stewy is he does have a tiny sarcoid on his eyelid. It hasn't really bothered him since I bought him, but it will probably be an issue when I go to sell him eventually. Stewy is very calm and collected. He's really outgoing and playful. He is a completely different kind of personality compared to the other horses. While I was making this video, I actually could not remember the order that I got the last couple of horses, and so they're a little bit out of order. It looks like Frisco Bill is still enjoying grazing out in the lawn. These next two horses I did get within a month of each other in 2022. Studman was a stud when I bought him, and it's just easier if I get two of these at the same time. I save a little bit of money on the out call for the gelding, and then I have two horses that are in recovery and can be friends. One of the most notable things about Studman is he does have a really gnarly scar on one of his back legs. This is probably from an old wire cut, and he can be a little bit touchy about that leg from time to time. He is one that had a lot of trouble with his feet. When I bought him, he was foundered, so it's been a little bit of a lengthy recovery time for him. He cannot go out on the grass, and he does require a lot of special considerations to his diet and the type of shoes that I put on him. Because of all of the trouble that I've been having with his feet, he has not been started under saddle. He does have a few signs that he maybe was not treated properly early on in his life. I also think, like Gus, that he does have papers floating around somewhere that got the old switcheroo. He is an extremely well-built horse, and there is no doubt in my mind that at one point he did have papers. When I very first got Studman, I did saddle him and do some free lunging with him in the arena, but he does not know very much. He also did buck quite a bit, so either he was a real handful when they went to start him, or he hasn't been actually started before. Most of you guys recognize Skeletor. He's probably the tallest horse I have right now, and he continues to grow. He was a literal skeleton when I bought him, but that is not the reason I named him Skeletor. He is a very sneaky, mischievous horse who is always seeming to get himself into trouble. So I named him Skeletor after the character in the Masters of the Universe comics. As you can see, when he's standing right next to Studman, he is so much taller than him. Skeletor is currently in a pretty lengthy rehab for a torn suspensory. He is 5 years old this year, and he is ready to be started, but I cannot do any more training with him until his leg is healed. The prognosis is not super great, so there is a pretty good chance that he will spend a lot of his life as a pasture pet. I did buy him with the intent to find him a new home, but with his current injury, I am definitely going to keep him until we figure it out. A horse like Skeletor with a big personality can get along with a wide variety of people, but with an injury like his, it is very likely that he would end up back in a bad situation. Even with all of his nonsense, I kind of like this big goofy guy, so I have no trouble keeping him for as long as he needs. While he was being refed, I did work a lot with him on under saddle things. I just haven't ridden him yet. Even with his injury, he's still able to go on trailer rides, and I can haul him around to the local arenas with the other horses to keep his mind occupied. Being a warm blood, he does think a little bit differently than all these little cow ponies. He has a very similar attitude to Stewy. He's very outgoing and playful. There is not a whole lot around that scares Skeletor. He is pretty brave about everything. I have found that he really doesn't mind being by himself if he gets enough interaction with humans. He does, however, have some trouble getting along in a herd because he doesn't have the best manners with the other horses. He is a little bit on the pesky side towards the other horses, especially when he has a lot of excess energy, so that makes him a little bit harder to get along with his pasture mates. I have been a little bit up in the air about where exactly Skeletor is going to spend his summer. He might spend it here at the barn eating grass on his own, or I have thought that he is sound enough now where he can go out with the herd every day. Since his injury doesn't have a good prognosis anyway, I might just let him enjoy the summer out with the other horses.
Girl.
The next horse on the list I haven't really talked about very much because she is one of the ones that will move on to a new home pretty soon here. I did get Primrose a year before I got Skeletor and Studman. She came from the same sale that I got most of the other horses at. She is one of the horses that I was really surprised I was able to buy for the price that I did. Like most of my other horses, she was only a few $100s. At the sale, she did have a pretty significant wound on her neck that I managed to get stitched up really quickly, and you cannot even tell that it was even there. When I bought her at the sale, she did sell great, but she is a registered quarter horse and I do have her papers now. She is one that I did get in contact with her old owners and filled in a lot of the blanks. This is the kind of horse that I really hate to see at the sale barn, but am more than happy to snatch them up when they come through. She has really, really nice conformation and she wasn't started when I bought her. She is one that probably causes the most trouble around here because I do get a lot of stallions in. She is the kind of mare that wants to have babies with all of the boys. Prim was born in 2019, making her 5 years old this year.
Prim.
I did hop on her a few times bareback last year, but other than that, she has not been started under saddle. I really love Prim, but she is the kind of horse that is going to be able to get along with a wide variety of owners.
Girl.
As much as I'd love to keep her, she is the kind of horse that has to move along and find their own person in order for me to get more. The last couple of years, I have been accumulating more horses than normal. I don't know if it's just getting harder for me to let these guys go or if it's because I've been buying a lot more high-risk horses that are harder to rehome after they've been rehabbed. But Prim should have no trouble finding a really good home where they can spend a lot more time with her than I can. She is a registered quarter horse and she is bred to be kind of an all-around rodeo type of horse, which I think she'll be really good at. I sneak in a few more scratches for Skeletor before I move on to the next horse. It seems like Frisco Bill has strayed a little bit too far.
Come on, old boy. Come on. Come on.
He does get fed a mash a few times a day because he is missing quite a few teeth now. Although I don't really like him wandering so far, it is nice to see that he's feeling comfortable enough to leave his mare for a pretty long walk. This old boy can get a little bit stocked up from time to time, so it's best that he keeps his old body moving. The next horse is one that I actually got before Prim. I'm not exactly sure how old Nigel is, but he is the oldest animal on the property. He is easily 30 years old and my vet thinks that he is much closer to 40. Out of all of the horses that I own, he is probably the one that needs the most care and attention. Partially because he's old, but also partially because he is such a little diva. He also gets mashed several times a day. In addition to his own private paddock, he does have a stall in the barn.
Wow.
Springtime is his favorite time because he is still a stallion, so he spends a lot of the time prancing around trying to attract Prim. Since he is so old, it is unrealistic for me to think that he would make it through a gelding procedure, so he will stay a stallion. For all the nonsense that he's always putting me through, he still is a pretty good boy. One of my most recent purchases and the reason that I actually started my YouTube channel is Scarlet.
Girl.
I got her in October of 2022 as a little tiny 3-month-old foal. I can hear these little killdeer making a big ruckus,
Tiny?
so Tiny is definitely prowling about.
Come on.
Tiny is probably a very close second to Nigel in the whole Diva department. Getting back to Scarlet, I don't think I've talked about this very much, but she was actually a horse that I had purchased for someone else. She was part of a giant herd of reservation horses that were brought into the sale, and they were selling extremely cheap. When she came through for $25, I thought I could definitely find her a home. At that same sale, I had already purchased a little friend for Nigel. But when I got this girl home, she was really sick, so I decided to keep her and sell Nigel's little buddy to a bunch of kids. It is a little bit crazy how things work out sometimes, because if I hadn't kept Scarlet, I don't know if I would have started my YouTube channel at all. She has been one of the most difficult horses for me to teach the basics to, but here in the last couple months, she really has been improving quite drastically. She also still has a few lumps and bumps from her time as a wild horse, including this really weird spot on her neck that I'm pretty sure is a bite from a stallion. Scarlet will be turning 2 around the 1st of July, and I was really hoping to hit that 100,000 sub mark by then. With her getting more mature, I am finally able to start in some more meaty parts of her training. So if you guys want to see that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of her training. Those little killdeers have been working really hard to try and entice Tiny, but she doesn't care too much about them. She has been far too busy keeping gophers out of the tack room, and I can tell she is starting to lose a lot of her steam for the year. Ever since I brought Scarlet home, her and Tiny have been really good friends. Tiny does this to most of the new horses, but every once in a while she finds one that she really likes, and Scarlet is one of those. It has been really fun to see over the last year Scarlet finally start to come out of her shell. She's replaced the really strong flight response that she had with a ton of curiosity that will make her future training so much easier. She definitely still has a little bit of a wild side, so we're still trying to tamper that down just a little bit more. But for a grade horse that was only $25 at an auction, she was a pretty darn good investment so far, I think. And with that, we are wrapping up all of the horses that I have over at the main barn. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I have one more horse left that's still over in quarantine. As I'm pulling out of the driveway this evening, I do notice that the little baby killdeers are right in the driveway again. They are so extremely hard to see. I was really worried that I was gonna run them over. Since I haven't seen some of these babies in quite a few years, I really want to make sure that I don't accidentally kill them. I did see the babies run over into the grass, and here is one of them hunkered down. I'm trying not to get too close, but here is a good look at how cute these little things are. They do an extremely good job of camouflaging themselves because they are really hard to see. Naturally, as soon as I get going again, the mama bird pops out and steers me away from her little babies as she escorts me off of the property. At least I know the little babies are going to be safe one more night. I travel just a few miles down the road and pop over to my big quarantine pen. As usual, Ziggy is pretty excited to see me and to get another meal. I purchased Ziggy in April of this year, so I haven't had him very long at all. Currently, he is just finishing up the tail end of his initial rehab, which wasn't too tricky. He was a fairly easy horse to get looking pretty good again. Ziggy is an 18-year-old Arabian. He was actually purchased from a catalog horse sale for a few $100s. It is really not uncommon to see horses of his age being sold out of a real working job. Ziggy was a horse on a guest ranch, and he probably just aged out of their program or was a little bit too small for the size guests that they had coming in. I've got a few things in the work that are kind of pertaining to Ziggy. I am going to be juggling the horses around, and I just want to make sure I get them in the right combination. When I first purchased Ziggy, I was anticipating a much longer rehab, but he is really looking pretty good right now. He is also getting quite bored being back here with just the neighbor horse, and I think he would really like some constant work. Ziggy is the exact kind of horse that needs a little bit of help moving on to their new home. The type of owner that is perfect for Ziggy does not usually have the skills to go to an auction and pick out the right kind of horse that they need. Since I have a ton of experience in this area, it is rather easy for me to find a horse like Ziggy with minimal problems that can move on to another home pretty successfully. Keeping a horse like Ziggy compared to some of the other ones I have would be a much less stressful situation for me. He would be a really easy horse to just enjoy every day and hit the trails with. But I do have a particularly special set of skills that I really do enjoy using, so Ziggy will probably move on to a new home this summer. This old girl is not mine, she is the neighbor's horse, and she does keep all of the horses in quarantine company. Ziggy is probably not the last horse I'll buy in 2024, so keep your eyes peeled for future videos on new horses. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.